I have serious problems with Marvel's Avengers. No, not the movies or the comics, but the upcoming co-op brawler from Crystal Dynamics published by Square Enix. Now, I've tried to put on a brave face for this one. I watched on in confusion as the game was revealed last year at E3, only to highlight first and foremost that the game would be a live service with years of content funded by cosmetic microtransactions. This was also the first moment that we learned that PlayStation owners would get exclusive content, but we wouldn't learn more about that for quite some time yet. Curiously, the developers chose to show off only a very specific section of scripted gameplay during that reveal, and people were immediately cautious, like, why weren't they showing us? What were they hiding? I actually went behind the scenes with the developers to a gameplay showcase and saw actual gameplay, and it was cool. It was the gameplay you're seeing here now, just the first mission where everything's sort of going to shit and the Golden Gate Bridge is collapsing and you're switching between the whole squad, and it was very cool stuff. Later on at PAX Australia, I played this game, playing through the first mission and one of the combat simulations, and I liked it. It was a basic brawler with really high production values. Immediately, I could tell that there was a lot more sizzle than there was sausage, but I was okay with that. For a long time now, I've said that I expect this to be a fun 20-hour game that I play through and put down and probably never think about ever again. I no longer hold that view. I spent about 8 hours playing through the PS4 version of this game, and I'm here to tell you that this thing is going in all the wrong directions at once. Technically, narratively, the combat, the mission design, the weird loot game, and the really disappointing focus on monetization right the way through. The Avengers beta just left me feeling so cold. I've not felt a chill like this since Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and before that, Anthem. And even then, I enjoyed Anthem's beta a lot more than I enjoyed this. I played the Avengers on a PS4 Pro since the beta was exclusive to PS4 pre-order customers this weekend. Can I just start by saying that's a really shitty thing to do, and that betas shouldn't be used as a pre-order incentive, and they especially shouldn't be platform exclusives. Anyway, moving on. So, I played it on PS4 Pro, where performance can really only be described as terrible. The game offers two modes, 4K, which prioritizes resolution, and a performance mode, which prioritizes frame rate. I spent most of the time playing on the performance mode, and from what I can tell, frame rate is uncapped, and in its absolute best moments, it can reach around about 60 frames a second. These best moments are about as rare as hen's teeth though. We're talking about the VR training room before any enemies spawn, the elevator loading sequences when there's nothing going on, walking around the Avengers HQ when there's no enemies there. Basically, when the game stops being a game and just sort of becomes a kind of interactive loading sequence or a cutscene, it can hit 60 FPS. Otherwise, it's the least reliable 30 FPS I've seen in a long time. Pretty much anything will trigger massive frame drops here. Enemies spawning, particle effects, destructible environments, moving the camera too fast, all of it just tanks the frame rate immediately. It's honestly so bad that it manifestly impacts actual gameplay. The whole thing feels so clunky and unresponsive for a variety of reasons, but one of those reasons is that the FPS is just struggling to keep up with your inputs or with whatever's going on screen. This was already bad, but I forced myself to switch over to the 4K mode because, you know, I had to test it, and man, I don't want to say this is unplayable, but it's basically unplayable.
There's no... Look at that!
Oh my god!
See? Look at this game!
Oops. So how's your night? Yeah, good. I need to go to bed. I'm really fucking drunk.
On the 4K setting, not only are you getting massive frame drops on the reg, but you're also getting the most egregious motion blur I think I've ever seen in a AAA game. It makes me feel sick at times, and that's not something I ever experienced before. I got motion sick playing the Avengers, and you can't even turn the motion blur off because there's no option for it. The other thing that contributes to this disorienting feeling you get when playing this game is the screen shake. The screen is shaking all the damn time. I get that they want me to feel the earth-shattering might of the Hulk when he slams down on his foes, and I get they want me to drink deep the boom crash opera that are these destructible environments, but there's just so much goddamn screen shake that it's hard to stay focused on what's actually happening on the screen. And yes, once again, You cannot disable it or even adjust it. You are just stuck with it. Online networking is really broken at this point. Basically, I only successfully matchmade with people a handful of times. The rest I would try and join games and it would either just hang on the menu or it would try and load me into a game and it would fail and then it would boot me back to the very front menu of the whole game and I'd have to load in everything all over again.
Get excited. Here it comes. Here it comes. What is it? Failed to join the session. Yes, we called it. Thank you very much. That happens every single damn time.
That's actually quite good.
That's
that
great.
You knew that.
Now it's now we get booted back to the
all the way to the beginning,
the very front of the game.
I just ended up disabling the matchmaking a lot of the time because I wanted to play the actual game, and that meant that I had to play a whole bunch of missions solo, which was important and illuminating for reasons we'll come back to. TLDR, I know this is a beta to test online functionality, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, because yeah, troubleshooting networking issues is a thing that these betas can be used for, even sort of fake betas like this that are live for a few weeks before a game's release. Where I'm much more concerned is in the area of bugs and stability. I had multiple hard crashes whilst playing. I had to restart the game twice because it just hung on a menu without doing anything. I had one mission where I spawned in with multiple AI companions, like duplicates of the heroes, and all of them were bugged out and wouldn't move. I had a weird geometry issue where I was hanging on an invisible ledge. I had lots of problems. I sort of felt like each mission was its own sort of crapshoot. Like, would I be able to matchmake? Would I be able to finish the mission if I eventually started one without the game crashing? All of that. That's not a good feeling when the game you are playing releases in less than a month. And please, for the love of God, miss me with all this it's a beta shit. Like, yes, some things like network will hopefully get a few kinks ironed out before launch, but the rest won't. The bugs won't. The horrendous frame rate won't. This is a lesson we have been taught dozens of times now, and yet the dedicated fandoms for whatever game refuses to learn it. They just flock to the defense of their beloved franchise, holding up the beta label like some mighty shield with which to deflect criticism. No, no, no. This is how the game will ship. They might fix it a few months later, maybe, but the issues will be in at launch. The sooner you can accept that, the less disappointed you're going to be. The Avengers game charts a fairly similar narrative course to the MCU with which we've all become so familiar. The movies did a brilliant job of taking the classic comic book elements, fusing them with a mature but accessible emotional drama, and drizzling on some dry, cool wit to keep things in perspective. The rejection of the bleak and humorless DC universe was perhaps the best possible testament to the fact that if grown-ass men and women were going to sit down in a movie theater to watch a big green monster fight space aliens, we'd at least like a few jokes thrown in so nobody mistakes us for taking any of this too seriously. The Avengers game is trying to do the same thing the MCU did, and I think the results are mixed. The game leans more into the classic comic book inspired rendition of the heroes with a visual style that feels overtly cartoony rather than stylized to appeal to a more contemporary taste. Despite this, there's clearly an effort to reach the more human moments between team members, with already a few cutscenes laying the groundwork for team tension or individual self-doubt. Honestly, it's too early to say how this stuff will land given how little we've seen during the beta. Much of the comedic charm is meant to come from Kamala Khan, aka Ms. Marvel. She's a regular person who is transformed into Mr. Fantastic 2.0. Like, actually, she has the same powers, so I'm not quite sure why she exists. She's an Avengers superfan and won a fan fiction contest. That's why she was there when things went down on A-Day. She's the main protagonist in this game, and really the driving force behind reassembling the Avengers. Despite this, she spends her time literally fangirling over the team the whole time, just serving up fawning and often cringe-inducing dialogue so that we're left in no uncertain terms that she really loves the Avengers. I don't know, I just wasn't loving the humor here.
Now I have my own room on the Chimera. Is this really happening?
More broadly, the story feels kind of, yeah. The A-Day attacks seem to mutate some of the population, so now lots of people have superpowers. There's a new mega corporation that's sprung up, who of course have an army of robots at their disposal. The Avengers are scattered to the winds, and you need to put them back together to overcome the evil du jour. Look, it's too early to say anything definitive about this stuff, but I will say that it certainly hasn't grabbed me. You know how when you saw Batman Begins, and from the very opening moments you were like, yes, I see where this is going, I'm down for this. Same for the tone set for the MCU by Iron Man 1. Same for the tone set by Joker. Same for Superman Red Sun, or The Watchmen, or Batman Arkham Asylum, or The Boys. You just see a setup and you can feel whether or not it's going to be for you. The Avengers doesn't feel like it's going to be for me. With so much affinity to these characters through decades of comics and cartoons and most recently the MCU, I feel like Crystal Dynamics needed to serve up a unique twist to really hook us, and this does not feel like it. The Avengers is exactly what it looks like, a co-op beat-em-up where you fight alongside fellow Avengers to take down waves of bad guys. People have said that it's basically Marvel Ultimate Alliance with higher production values, and I'd agree with that, except that those games pretty much worked where this one pretty much doesn't. At the most basic level, it just feels so fucking clunky. Like, it does. It doesn't feel like each character is smart and snappy and responsive. It doesn't feel like you can make them do exactly what you want them to do at a moment's notice. It feels like it takes a split second for your inputs to register and then another split second for the animations to get going. It feels like the characters all move really slowly. It feels like it takes too long to charge your heavy attack. It feels like the aim on the ranged attacks is too slow to track. It just feels like you're walking through waist-high water every moment in this game, and that's not the feeling you want to have when you're controlling an Avenger. The frame rate doesn't help. With so many frame drops and so much motion blur and screen shake, creating the feeling of fluid responsive combat was always going to be an uphill battle, and in this case, the hill won. Camera is another issue. The camera does whatever the fuck it wants. From what I can tell, the game is really focused on trying to make combat look as cinematic as possible, pulling to dramatic angles to highlight the spectacle. But it does this to the detriment of the actual gameplay because it's so unpredictable that you have to spend all your time managing the camera rather than just fighting. It's also really tight in, like it's close to you, like too close. And I don't think that works in a game where you're often surrounded by enemies. Most games like this pull the camera back somewhat so you can see what's going on around you and you can kind of respond to incoming attacks or plan your next target. Here, you very often just can't see enough. It feels like you're watching the action through a toilet roll, and that is not fun. There's a discussion to be had about the depth, breadth, and complexity of combat. In short, there's a light attack and a heavy attack. You can hold down the heavy attack for a super heavy attack. You can do aerial knockups. There are moves you can execute from the air. There are combos that involve combining your light and heavy attacks. There's a dodge and parry feature that will test your timing, etc., etc. The words I have just used can be used to describe pretty much every melee-focused combat game ever, from Dark Souls to Devil May Cry to Ghost of Tsushima, whatever. The Avengers has all the right ingredients there, it ticks all the boxes, but combat just ends up feeling so repetitive and one-note. There's gonna be people in the combat section critiquing my gameplay like, oh, you didn't learn the dodge combo uppercut thing. Sure, there's definitely stuff in this game. There's combos and special moves, and there's a skill tree that opens up new moves. The bottom line though is that every move in the game feels pretty much identical to all the other moves. Good combat models like in Bayonetta or God of War or Horizon Zero Dawn, they all allow the player to express themselves through a variety of attacks that feel different even though the outcome is always the same. The enemy loses health. You don't really feel like you can express yourself here in the Avengers. Rather than your moves each feeling distinct and having specific utility at specific moments, every move sort of dissolves into this indistinguishable mass of repetitiveness. The final nail in the combat coffin is level, mission, and encounter design, and to be clear, there's actually quite a bit of content available in this beta, at least, 8-9 missions, so we have a fair amount to evaluate when we look at this stuff. Level design really doesn't do too much. It's like a lot of empty space and generic corridors and really basic city streets. I never looked at any of the environments and thought, hey, this is cool. It kind of just feels like tabula rasa to give the Avengers enough space to move around without bumping into each other while trying to keep the frame rate issues to a minimum. The missions themselves are very similar to Warframe's missions. You run through corridors, clearing out bad guys, and have to then complete objectives like taking down an elite squad, or destroying a generator, or standing on points to capture and hold them. The ones involving standing on things really suck. Some of them are just single points to stand on, and if you're playing with AI teammates, they're too dumb to ever stand on the point, and you can't command them to do so, so you have to stand there getting shot at by every ranged enemy, and it's so annoying. Similarly, when you have to capture and hold 3 different points, your AI teammates just have no concept of this whatsoever, and it's basically like you're playing solo. Yes, I know that this is a co-op game, okay? I know that. It's a co-op game. I know that. I know. But a lot of people will play solo, and when they do, they will encounter this stuff, and it sucks. For some, the Avengers will give them exactly what they were hoping for, which is a simple and accessible path into the superhero power fantasy. I've already seen plenty of people saying that they really like the combat and the missions, and it's all doing what they hoped it would do. These people definitely exist, but if I was a betting man, I'd wager that those people were in the minority. I do not think that most people will find this combat to be responsive, dynamic, or just fun enough. And I also think that people will quickly tire of the level and mission design. This is a massive problem given the fact that this is a live service, loot-driven game that you are supposed to want to play for hundreds or thousands of hours. Okay, so here's where we get to the really shitty stuff. For whatever reason, the developers decided that this Avengers game shouldn't be a one and done job. It should be an ongoing live service that will continue to add new characters and missions and story beats. So a live service game needs money to survive, and to get that, they need to create a sort of treadmill for players to run on. So what's the treadmill? Well, it's the loot game and the cosmetic store and the battle passes for each character. Yes, you heard that right. There are battle passes for each character in this game. Let's start with the loot game. I've played a lot of loot games in my time. They're kind of my thing. I love them. The Avengers loot system is not good. You run around the levels as Ms. Marvel and you open up chests that contain a new emblem for your costume, and this emblem gives you a 26.4% chance of stunning an enemy when you punch them, and you can upgrade the power level of those items with currencies you find scattered throughout the levels, and you don't actually see the loot when you equip it, by the way, because the character's appearance is determined by the skin that you're wearing and whether or not you've earned that for free or you've bought it from the cash shop, whatever. So loot is basically just generic stat sheets completely separate from the presentation of your character. Again, all of the tick boxes are here. Other games do very similar stuff to what I've described, like Warframe or Destiny or Diablo or whatever. You collect items that allow you to augment your playstyle. To some extent, it kind of works here. I mean, I'm only very early into this, but I can see how a different set of melee gauntlets might change my playstyle a little or maybe a lot. I can't say how meaningful build diversity will be in the future because it's too early now, but I can see how it could exist given the loot I've already encountered. I think my biggest issue is just the suspension of disbelief thing. It works in those other games, it doesn't fit here. Like, look at this. This is an upgrade for Hulk's spine? It's a stimulator or something? And this slot actually increases his range damage. Like, first of all, Hulk doesn't need any fucking stimulants. He's stimulated enough. And secondly, why does this impact range damage? And thirdly, and most importantly, why the hell is this in the game? It just feels so bolted on, so out of place, so unnecessary, and so goofy. Loot is the central pillar of this game's structure. You run around levels and have to kick over these crates which contain resources that you then use to increase the light level of your gear so that you are powerful enough to do harder missions. And there are like 4 of these resources for some reason. I think they all do the same thing though, I'm not sure about that. And side note, when you do knock over these crates out in the world, the resources don't automatically get collected, so you have to stand on top of them for a second to make sure that they get vacuumed up before you move on. The final point is around cosmetics. So as I mentioned, the gear you collect will have no visual properties whatsoever, they are just stat sheets. I think this sucks. I like the freedom to be able to customize the look of my character with stuff like transmog, big fan of that, but I also want the base gear I collect to look cool. Gear that only buffs my stat sheet is like chugging a potion or leveling up. The best loot games have always created some sort of link between an item's visual properties and its stats. Anthem did away with this link and it really sucked there, and it sucks equally here. The reason they did this was because the appearance of your character is where Square Enix will make their money, and there's some big plays here. I mean, there's a cash shop where you can buy skins, and then there's these, the challenge cards, which are essentially battle passes. Each character has one and they are free, but your progress is throttled daily, so you can only earn progress at a set amount each day or each week, unless you're willing to spend some of the in-game currency to advance your progress. Okay, fine, this sort of seems a bit onerous and unnecessary, but whatever. this stuff isn't what actually concerns me. What concerns me is that the current Battle Pass items all have the word free underneath them, and there's a big empty space in the UI where a second paid track of the Battle Pass would neatly slot. They aren't going to label these items free and then leave a big ass gap here unless they were planning on filling it with something that you would actually pay money for. Every character has one of these Battle Passes. So is this the first game that will offer a paid Battle Pass for each character in the game? I don't know, but I think maybe yes, and that's pretty wild. But I also think it's kind of on form for this game if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Last year, Ghost Recon Breakpoint released its beta. I was pretty much the first person to ring the alarm bell on that one and be like, hey guys, this sucks, it's full of needless RPG bullshit, and the only thing that explains all of these bad choices is monetization. I think it's the same thing here with the Avengers. When you first load up this game, you have to create a Square Enix account to play it. Why? Why? When you create one and log in, the first thing you're greeted with is a FORTNITE skins promotion where you link your newly created Square Enix account with your Epic Games account and you get some FORTNITE skins. The beta is for PS4 pre-order customers only this weekend, and then for pre-order customers on other platforms next weekend, so beta access is essentially dangled in front of people to get them to lock in their purchase before the reviews are out. Spider-Man, one of the most beloved heroes in the Marvel Universe, is only available for PlayStation owners. Just today, I learned that Verizon Up customers are getting unique in-game rewards, as are Virgin Mobile customers in the UK, as are people who buy all 3 flavors of 5 gum. And this is all before the character-specific battle passes that we probably have to pay for at some point. I mean, like, what is going on here? Like, what is going on? Batman Arkham games, Spider-Man on PS4, these were games that you could just tell were passion projects. They just oozed love of the franchises on which they were based. The Avengers feels like the opposite of that. It feels like the starting point for this game was, we have the Avengers IP and we need to make as much money from it as possible for as long as possible. What sort of game would let us do that? This AAA live service boondoggle is the result, full of needless cranks and levers and gears that can all be pulled to extract long-tail engagement and monetization. I look at the boring and repetitive mission structure and the completely out-of-place loot system, and I think to myself, it didn't need to be this way. There's another game that could have been made here, one that is singular and finite and curated, one that doesn't put people on a treadmill. And that game kind of exists in the first level. We got a taste of that here, but the other level following it, the other single player level, wasn't anywhere near that level of quality. And all the other levels I played were just the kind of repetitive stuff that I described to you earlier. I mean, it just felt like a lot of banality and big promises for how cool things will be in future when eventually Hawkeye gets added to the game. I don't care about the future promises of content delivery, by the way. I have never cared when any company promises me that the game I'm buying today will be good in the future. Just trust us and stick with us. Look at Breakpoint, look at Anthem. Destiny 2 had to be wrenched from Activision's avaricious jaws before it could be saved. Fallout 76's answer to live service survival was pay-to-win microtransactions and a monthly subscription. EA gave up halfway through World War II rather than deliver the remaining promised content for Battlefield 5. The Allies are still stuck in the Pacific Theater some 80 years later because live service content promises almost always count for shit. Now, as I've said many times before, I am okay with fair monetization. I don't mind listening to ads on Spotify because I'm listening to music for free. I don't mind microtransactions in free-to-play games because they have to make their money somehow. But The Avengers is a $60 game with an $80 deluxe edition. You have already paid for this game, and straight away they are putting their hand out asking for more. That, plus the exclusive deals and the Verizon partnership and the FORTNITE sponsorship and the battle passes and the weird loot system and all the rest, Avengers just feels kind of icky. Like, ew. I've never had a AAA game that made me feel like that, but yeah, this feels kind of icky. I look at it and I kind of recoil like, I'm not touching that. That's how I feel about this game. And I know I've been really harsh on it, given that, you know, it's a beta right now and there's more content coming or whatever else, but like, that's how I feel about this game at this point. You know, I really just have no interest in touching any part of it, because so much of it is about the promise of the future or the trust It's like if they're selling us a live service game, it's like we have to trust them that they're going to do something great with it. And I don't have any trust for that right now, given what I've seen in this beta. And, you know, given how beloved the Avengers are, and given that this is probably the only real Avengers game we're ever going to get, maybe, it's a real shame that we have ended up at this point.